So for the next part here, I have asked Kristine, Sylvest, Brinks to take over for me for a while so I can rest a little bit. So she'll introduce herself and take the next part. So please enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll just wait 1 minute for the last ones to join us again. Okay. Okay, a short introduction to me. I'm Kristine Sylvest Brinks. I'm from DTU Science Park, as you can see here, closely linked to DTU. We are a science park. Our main purpose is to rent out facilities to Medtech, Deep Tech, Biotech, everything with a tech. So, of course, a lot of spin-outs from DTU. Another part of what we are doing is hosting or facilitating programs for startups. It's where my heart is, and that's what I do. So I am program manager for our latest or newest program called Medtech Growth. I have been with DTU Science Park for 3 years, working with startups very closely, giving them advices, pushing them a lot, actually, help them raise money. So that's my main thing. Yes, so welcome back for the break. I hope you all enjoyed the lunch. I will facilitate a bit from here. Marianne needs a break. That's okay. I will ask the questions, and I hope you will be as active as you've been before the break. So, just a little bit what we have been doing so far. This morning we have talked a lot about the collaboration in between the universities and the hospitals. We have really pointed out how important it is with the clinical testing and the close cooperation. We've had some success cases, especially from Israel and from Switzerland. And this afternoon we will take another focus. We will talk more about how do we commercialize the ideas. The startups, how do we support them? How do we get from the idea all the way to the market? Not just universities and hospitals in the beginning, but all the way. And that's also my main focus. So, we have started this Medtech Accelerator. And why do we do this now? We have been running programs for 10 years. A very famous one in Denmark, at least, Danish Tech Challenge. In the Danish Tech Challenge program, lots of startups in the Medtech area, they have participated. We figured out that this area keeps some special focus, and it's another journey than just a normal startup. What else? Why else we're doing this is because we have a lot of companies staying with us in this field, so we believe we know a lot about this topic. Another part is that, as we talked about earlier today, we need solution for this area. This whole sector needs optimization. We need new solutions. We all see the opportunities. Another thing is there's a gap in the ecosystem. In Denmark, from the idea to the market, there's no one to help these startups. Besides BII, of course, they're also here. But so there's a gap in the ecosystem. Because it is a special journey. And as we see it at the moment, the sky is the limit because there's so many possibilities and opportunities in this field. As we talked about, the ideas is there. If the hospitals open the doors, we also have the opportunities to test. So let's focus and look at the sky here. So for a normal startup, we have the idea, maybe we patent it, we test, we go back, we do some stuff about the prototyping, and then we go to the market. That's not the case for medtechs, because there's this large step, or many small steps in between. Nobody mentioned it all morning, and I was wondering why. Because this is a huge area for medtech startups. This can take years, and it's complicated. It takes resources, it takes knowledge, and it's getting even worse. I don't know how many of you knows about the certifications we have, both in the US and in Europe. So when you are a startup, you need to decide in the beginning where to focus, because if you're going to Europe or the European market, it's one certification. If you decide to go to the US, it's another part. And you can't do it by yourself. That's also why it's super complicated to be a medtech, because you just be like, okay, we'll fix this, we're done. It's not really an option. You need some external help. And that's why we come back to the money. It's expensive. So it's not easy to be a startup. Every time I see a new startup or interact with a new startup, I'm like, come on, it's a long journey. Keep focused, be energized. You can do it. But I know it's a hard one. So I decided to do some fun facts about medtech startups. Fun facts. So, time to market. What do you think in average? 15 years, it's over here. That could be. Especially if you don't start the regulatory from the beginning. Because if you want to do it super fast, to do it super optimized, you need to start the documentation and be super disciplined from the beginning. So in average, it's like 4 to 10 years. Yeah? It's a long time. It's a long time to keep focus without a salary. Imagine that. So, as Nico said in the beginning, the investment, it's the key to succeed. So, what do you think here? What does it take? It takes from 1 to 25 plus millions to go from idea to market. And it can take even more than that. If you don't start the regulatory from the beginning, you need to reverse it as well. So it can be plus 100 millions. Yeah, very fun facts here. So we need them to survive, and that's where you come in. I will challenge you a bit about that later on. In the first 3 years, only 25 they survive. That's a tough number. And it's a tough being a startup and knowing that 75% won't make it in the first 3 years. It's even higher when we get longer far down the road. So, how can we increase the success of these startups? How can we help them survive? We actually talked about it earlier today. I think one of the solutions for this regulatory strategy could be to keep them longer in the universities, to start helping them with the regulatory framework, maybe having a process for them. So they start, when they have the idea, they start the first 1 or 2 years, they will start with setting us the regulatory. That could be, I think that could be a solution. Any suggestions? How we can help them with this regulatory, because it's expensive, it takes a long time. How can you support? Any great solution, I would like to hear them. So, and again, back to the money, we talked about it before the break. It's super expensive to be a startup. It takes money, and it normally we say when they need money, it takes one full resource to look for money. Because it takes time, especially after Corona, it's been really super difficult. So keeping focus on the money could help them as well, and do them investable from the beginning. So make sure they have everything right from the beginning, both the regulatory but also the organization. The idea is in place, they start the clinical trials or the testing, so help them structure from the beginning. And also, we help them a lot with this collaboration with the hospitals, because they need to go out and test. And I love the talk we had this morning about how open the hospitals they are and how welcome the startups they are. They can just come. That's not the real thing we see. That's not the real world. Every time I have a startup that has developed a product that needs to be tested at the hospital, they struggle. They can't get in. It's a conservative market. They don't have time. Where's the resources? So we need to be more open-minded against startups. But let's start with the universities. That's a good place to start. Yeah? Yes, that was actually all for me. That was a Another topic. Yeah, took a turn here. Any questions or comments? Yeah, all the way back there.
Agile and iterative approaches.
It shouldn't be right from the beginning, but you need to be open-minded. Whenever you have an idea, it's about measure, build, learn. So when you have an idea, it's so important that you go out and test. It's so important that you have the connection to the hospitals or the customers or whoever wants to buy the product and go test it, get feedback, get all the information, and go back and redo. Yeah? Yes?
I fully agree with what you said, but one of the things in this early phase is the financing, and the financial chain for the startup as well for the support of that. What are your ideas to optimize that in Denmark? Because that is quite often a public job.
It could be a public job, yes.
It is not a public job. I'm very interested where you attract the companies to support. Can you hear the question?
Oh, I think you need the microphone, sorry. Can you repeat it?
My question is, I fully agree with what you said, and it's an interesting topic, but especially in the early stage, you need public funding and perhaps also privately funding to drive the whole chain of improvements and driving the startup. And how do you want to organize that? And your reaction was already, it's not only public, it's also private. So then my second question is, where do you gain the private fundings at that moment?
Oh, if I could solve that.
That's
that is a really large problem, and we see it all the time. In Denmark, we have something called Innovationsfonden. They can support in the early stage, but getting a bit further, it's a huge problem. We have the VCs. It takes time to raise money. In average, we say from you start till you have the money, if you're attractive, it takes up to 10 months. So it's a full-time job raising money. How to solve it? I don't know. Do it if they can become more attractive. It helps. Yeah. If I was an investor, I would definitely look at the regulatory strategy. If it's in place, if they know how to work with it, get around it, that would be a factor I would look into. So if we can help them with that part, we can do some differences. Yeah?
Hi. I think it's a really interesting bit in terms of how do you overcome this cultural view of maybe in tech there's this kind of regulatory that's a pain, it's hard and hard for us, we need to get around for it, versus the doctors and clinicians and patients personally who think regulatory is the bit that actually makes sure that the products that we get are actually something that works and stops cowboy kind of sales things happening. So there's kind of a mix of cultures there. And I was wondering sort of how do you talk about sort of getting around regulatory and...
No, not getting around it. You can't get around it.
Exactly. Or that it's harder and harder and it's actually... But it's better for us as
it
the
is better for
consumers.
us.
So
it's the safety we have as a patient.
Yeah, how do we mix those two cultures, I guess? This very conservative, low risk from a clinician and patient side versus kind of maybe the more high risk thinking in terms of technology development.
How? I'm not sure you can influence it. You can't. It's the rules giving. It's regulation. There's nothing really to come around or get around. It's something you need, and you can't succeed without it because you need the certifications. You need the CE mark, and as we said, it's our safety that the products stay okay. I wouldn't put anything in or on my body without it being tested and the evidence is okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it just doesn't mix with kind of agile or... I think that two... Maybe they don't mix super well, is what I'm saying.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get what you're asking about. Sorry.
It's okay.
No, but it's not flexible. You're so super right in that. No, it's not. Yes, over here.
Did you think about... So you said starting the regulatory strategy or the process earlier. Did you think about shorten it making it more efficient, speeding
I
it up?
didn't set the rules. That's important
No,
to say that.
no, not you, but could it be a way that relieve the startups from this burden in some kind, maybe offering a service, for example, DTU offering the service for these startups, helping them so that they don't need to invest too much time in it, because the time at the early stage of startups is kind of important for the final success. I mean, just starting earlier doesn't mean you relieve them from the burden.
No, but starting earlier could help get the documents right from the beginning instead of doing reverse, because if you need to follow the rules if you're medtech.
Yeah.
So every time you change just the color of your product, you need to document it, and you need to tell them, why did I change the color and all that. That's super, but yes, starting it earlier could be an option. Like if DTU in the health had some kind of process, or they initiated the whole process for together with the startups, it could help them.
Okay.
Because when you meet the startups after 2-3 years, it's like, oh yeah, the regulatory, yes, maybe Q4 next year, and you're a bit like, oh my God, okay, you're already behind. You need to start earlier because all this documentation needs to be in place. Otherwise, it will take even more than 10 years.
Yeah. Maybe to the previous agile work environment. I think that for some processes it's not working. I mean, you cannot do financial planning agile. That's something that is contradicting, and the same I think here. You need to have the agile processes in the development phases, but then for the other planning you need more solid processes and do an overall plan. And
yeah, I need to finish now. I just got the sign from over here. Last question. Over here.
Thanks for the input. I think a small contribution to answering question number one is that I think in the sort of educational systems we should put more focus on teaching students, biomedical engineering students, or the regulatory things, because sometimes I experience that there's a sort of a naive thinking of what is actually possible. So just knowing something about what the regulatory process is, what is required, so you have this awareness early on in your product development, I think is super essential.
Very good suggestion, yes. So it's not a black box in front of them. Exactly. So thank you for listening to me. Next one up. Okay, thank you. So we have next speaker up, or presentation up. It's Enric. Please come up here. Enric, you're Program Manager for Medical Technologies and Medical Devices at European Innovation Council. Please come up here. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. I don't have any slides, so I don't need to.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I kind of like doing these things a little bit sort of interactive, if that's okay. I don't want to sort of break the format you had in mind, but it does seem to work very well if I discuss the EIC and the programs and you feel that you can raise your hand and we do a bit of a dialogue during the entire presentation. That's why I don't use the slides. But I do have like a little list of bullet points I want to go over, so at least I have a guide, and then if you ask questions, we can change that. So first, I give you a bit of background. So I'm also a program manager, and I tell you a little bit about myself and then about the organization, so you have a bit of context. So I was initially an academic for many, many years. I ended up becoming a tenure academic. It's standard life, writing papers and writing proposals and failing at many of them, and then occasionally getting some funded, usual thing. And at that time, I thought it would be nice to get devices into the market, and some colleagues here have a lot of experience, and probably much more experience than myself, and decided to leave academia, which is very unusual. So that's something I'm happy to discuss later over a coffee or whatever, because there are so many interesting lessons about that. So I left academia and went into the startup sort of life. Okay, very excited about this. I was relatively young, like 30-something. And then I got involved in the startups. I can also tell you a bit about the startups. I won't bore you about this, but I had a number of years of experience, raising capital, and it was like 20 years ago, so maybe everything was less developed. I was based in Barcelona, and the VC industry kind of grew up grew a lot. But at the time, I was relatively young, so we raised about a couple of million euros, not really a lot of money, but we did a number of spin-offs. And then a third leg in my life, my professional life, was running organizations that support financially startups and science to market programs. So that's me in a nutshell. So I knew the commission, I knew RTD, DG Connect, just because I was an academic or entrepreneur submitting proposals, and I used to go there as an expert, something I would recommend, by the way, if you can do it. It really helps a lot. Because my first proposal, I don't know if you remember the integrated project program, it was like a large proposal, 12 million euros. That was my first proposal. It was a complete failure. My score was so low. But then I got into the cycle, and I learned a bit more. My proposals improved. I became an expert. So that's a good suggestion if some of you are not yet experts. So I knew the people at the commission, and at one point when I was doing my previous story, they decided to set up a vehicle called the EAC, European Innovation Council. And I go into the organization a bit more. So the commission was a bit, as usual, worried about the fact that science didn't get to market, the usual story that we all hear all the time. And somebody decided they wanted to create a new vehicle that would just do that, support science to market projects. That's why the agency was created. So sometimes European government, creates these little satellites in the universe, and each satellite is focused on one task, because the theory goes that if you have an agency doing evaluation of proposals or basic research, applied research, it works better. So they created this vehicle, isolated vehicle, to support science to market. That was the idea. So in 2020, I joined the organization when it was really a pilot at the time. It wasn't really the full thing. So in 2021, it was created, and that's the EAC. So the main remit of the EAC is to support the creation of companies. If you ask my colleagues, the word unicorn will come up all the time, and this might be something useful for you if you're preparing business plans or proposals for us. There is always the word of unicorn in the background. So when you suggest something for us to invest in or to support as a grant, in the end, if it's a unicorn, a potential unicorn, it sounds much better. That might be a tip for you as well. So the EAC is based in Brussels, physical building, and what we do is we run a pipeline of 3 stages. And then I go to next point is this little dialogue. Stop me, please, with questions anytime, because I keep going, and don't hesitate. Okay, so the way we operate at the agency is as follows. So the theory is basic science is done at the ERC and other pillar 2, other pillars of Horizon. Basic science is not why the agency was created. It was created to create companies and scale up. And so the assumption is that when you come to us, you want to develop a technology in Pathfinder. We provide 4 million euros, non-dilutive. So this is a grant. You assemble a consortium. I'm sure many of you have done many of these projects already. But the core idea is Pathfinder is about developing a technology. So to give you an example, what do I mean by that? So in neuroscience, which is my background, my field, imagine that you've done some basic science in the past, and there's a nucleus in the brain. You now discover how it operates. You can connect that nucleus with behavior. You've done your Nature paper. This is the basic science part. And now you say, look, if I understand how this nucleus works, we should build a device. So that's the concept of Pathfinder. The theory is that you come to Pathfinder when you've done already your basic work, or somebody else has done it, and you're doing the applied part. That's perfectly fine. And you come to us and say, look, now I'm going to develop the core nucleus, the core of that device. And this could be electronics, it could be software, materials, implantable, it could be imaging, it could be ultrasound, it could be software. By the way, the EAC is a huge vehicle. So the budget started being 1.5 billion a year, and about 30 to 40% goes to health, and in particular 30% to medical devices. That's my portfolio. It's a huge portfolio, which gives you many opportunities in many ways. Okay, so Pathfinder, that's a concept. And then the assumption is that when you finish Pathfinder, you will get your core technology developed. You haven't done clinical trials, although it's possible, but we don't expect, with this image in mind, you don't expect you to go to hospitals and do validation already, but it's possible. Some of my projects are doing this, are doing clinical trials within Pathfinder. And of course, I love those because I see the progression happening very, very early on, but it's not compulsory to do that. So Pathfinder, the theory is if it's successful, you end up with a core part of your device already developed. probably you've done preclinical work, so small animals or large animals or maybe in vitro. Then we have transition. So transition is an additional check that we give you, 2.5 million, non-dilutive, so this is not an investment. If you have a company, you don't lose ownership, you don't get diluted, it's just a grant. And this is the final check before you connect with investors, because we realize many of the Pathfinder projects, if they were successful, okay, so a few papers, a few patents, and I could see the device, wow, this is working in an animal model, like pig model, swine model, still investors will not want to go in. We see that all the time. So in VC, Medtech VC, they want to see first in human. So some validation in humans typically is what they love. If you're before first in human, we painfully know that, right, in the field. They just go at you and go, oh, it's interesting, yeah, I'll call you some other time. And time flows and they don't call you. So you need to do some additional work always. So we provide an additional check and it's called transition. So if you come to transition, the idea is you show the evaluators that you were successful in a previous project, but you need this additional check to convince VCs. That's the concept that will help you if you come to transition. To come to transition, you come ideally from a previous project funded by us or by other programs of the Commission. So that's transition. At the end of transition, you've done this final step. That little thing that you knew, look, I have to do some first in human or some clinical validation because otherwise they will not fund me, because you do it under transition. And then you come to accelerator. So in accelerator, we try to operate under similar criteria as a private VC, as much as we can. It's a public vehicle, so that gives us lots of limitations. It makes us operationally not so good because we're slower than we should be. But still, that concept is there. We try to operate like a private VC. What that means is that we invest in tickets up to 15 million, 1.5. We take ownership with that investment. It's an equity investment, but always a minority stake, So, like 10%, something like that. And we ask you to find co-investors in the private sector. That makes life very difficult for the companies. We're seeing that, okay? But this is the model at the moment. So you come to us saying, by the way, you can come into the pipeline at Pathfinder level or accelerator from outside. You don't have to come from necessarily a previous project. For transition, it's still true that you have to come from a previous project. Okay? But you might come to accelerator without any funding from us in the past. That's perfectly okay. So 15 million, an additional sweetener of 2.5 million, which is a grant, and we combine those two. So this sweetener is something that everybody likes because it's non-dilutive. You can use that with investors saying, look, we got 15 million, which is an investment, so it's dilutive, but they gave me 2.5 million, which is a grant, so I can finish that bid that's really high risk. Don't worry, we will not use equity investment, we will not use your money, you can tell the investors. We will use public money to finalize that little stage, 2.5 million, and then we will use the equity for, could be research, but mostly should be clinical validation, sales, scale-up. That's the main purpose of equity, the equity investment. So this is the strategy we have in the agency. Summary, you come to us saying, look, the basic scientific understanding is there, and now I'm going to do the device and get into the market and bring it to the patient, okay? I'm sure there are questions. You can, okay, shoot, don't hesitate. Okay, I made a few notes about things that I heard or I discussed with you previously, and I thought I would just bring this up because maybe it was reasonable. One of the lessons learned, maybe I've been there for 4 years, and I'm leaving now in July. So that's the role of program manager, is a rotating role, is a rolling situation. So we come in from outside, we try to help them get the portfolio running, and then we go. So one of the things I've observed, which I did as well as an academic, I can assure you I did this many times, you marry to a technology because it's your little creature, and then you try to find users for it. But we see all the time in the agency that works very well is people who look at the market, patients, hospitals, and look, okay, this is a problem, and there is a window of opportunity. Now I go in and I solve that problem. Now, the match is very difficult because your background will never exactly match the need. So you really need to devote a lot of time to try to match what you know or your network knows and what the market needs. But when we see that you approach us with a need for which you found a solution, it works much better than when you have not always the case, of course, there are many exceptions. I mean, But this is very common. The other situation where you're doing microfluidics, for example, and you want to push it because it's your thing. I did microfluidics. So then, okay, how can I sell this? That doesn't tend to work. The opposite works much better. Look at the M&As, the acquisitions in the last year. You look at them and go, okay, read M&A news, and you go, okay, I know what the market is buying now. And you go in full on that. Okay, it's not so easy, of course, I understand. But the other situation doesn't quite work for us. So you get lower score in the evaluations, the market need is not clear, that doesn't work so much. And probably my last 2 minutes, so repurposing doesn't work so much. Where you have something in the lab that serves another purpose and you try to sell it to investors saying there's a market need, usually they spot it and that doesn't fly. Maybe we should go to questions already, and I have other bullet points, but maybe let's go for the questions. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Very interesting topic. Questions? Yes, over here.
Hi. Okay, so when we look at the Pathfinder and transition, these are consortium-based, which means the patent is co-owned by very strong institutions across EU, plus when you throw in an accelerator, then there's a company. As a private investor, I know, right? So how do we tackle this? Because I also know projects that's been going on for 2 years. The patent has not been negotiated yet because it's us, DTU, Imperial College, and it's been going on for 2 years. And that is one of the reasons why Europe has great research, but we're lagging way behind in terms of innovation. So, yeah, I mean, that's why the idea is great, but if a startup comes directly into accelerator, their chances of getting investment is higher because it's not as diluted in patent sense.
Yeah. The IP is a potential issue, but not always. Sometimes, it's a very good question, and of course, could be an issue. But in Pathfinder, for example, what we see often is there is a consortium of 6, 7, 8 academic teams. And then the reality is that the core technology is developed by 2 of them or 3 of them. So it's rarely the case where the entire consortium really honestly owns the core opportunities. Usually, I'm thinking of sort of an EuroTech project where there is a Swiss, by the way, entity and there is a Dutch entity. And really, those 2, maybe a third one, are the only ones. So the IP negotiation gets a little bit easier because there are fewer than you would fear. But amongst those 2 or 3, you have to negotiate. And then you have to get the TTOs, the tech transfer officers, to sit down. And it could be an issue. But, we tend to solve it. It's particularly easy to solve early stage because nobody sees the value of the early stage. When you get so close to investment, wow, then it becomes serious. But maybe it shouldn't be like that, but at the academic level, it used to be relatively easy to get those things close because, nobody knows that that's going to be a big company. And then when you progress to transition, you can already set up a single company. So for transition, you could already come as a company, but sometimes you don't, and you have 2 partners that, the 2 partners that really develop the product, those are the ones that leave the 6-member consortium, go into transition 2. They already agree on the IP a little bit more, they polish it, they finish the transition, and they go as a company. It could be an issue, but, and then I get lots of complaints about that. We had a case on neuromorphic architectures where the full consortium wanted to be co-owners of but this is rare. At the Pathfinder level, or this is transition, or what stage?
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I think you 2 should continue talking.
Yes.
Sounds interesting. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Henrik. Remember your small boat. Thank you so much. We will continue with Harmen de Jongh. Sorry if I can't pronounce it right. You need to help me here. Yes, welcome to the stage. You're Senior Program Manager at Technical University of Eindhoven. Yes, and leader of the EuroTech focus area together with DTU, Health and Bioengineering. Welcome.
Yep.
You get this one.
Okay. Yes. Well, so this is I'm part of the Eindhoven University of Technology. Let's see what's going forward. This one's going forward. EuroTech, of course, we know they have 5 focus areas. One of them is health and bioengineering, and actually I'm together with Yuval Guerini from the Technion. We're in the lead of actually trying to get things together and be a profile for this focus area. We've done an inventory about all the 6 EuroTech partners in there to see what are the complementarities, where can we help each other, where can we support each other in terms of expertise, ambitions, etc. We've come to some kind of short list of 5 different topics where we say, hey, this is something which is where we share common interest. I mean, Jan already started off. I saw already somewhere regenerative medicine in there. We've seen lab on a chip. We have seen diagnostic wearables. So this is clearly something that actually most of the technical universities that are involved in EuroTech share some interest and expertise. So I want to focus on actually regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine, and I hope this animation will work. What is regenerative medicine? Regenerative medicine is basically that we try to rely on this self-healing propensity that exists in the body. Cut your finger and after a few days your fingerprint is exactly identical as it used to be. What are, for example, if you have an artery around your heart, and there's a blockage there, you can have all kinds of surgery, open heart surgeries in order to replace these. What we are doing actually, and that's the basis of regenerative medicine, is that we develop materials, biomaterials, which you can actually insert in a small piece of the artery, and actually they are susceptible for your blood, all the cellular components that are provided in your blood, which start adhering to this biomaterial and start developing a new coherent tissue, which actually has the same biomechanics, the same rheological properties about elasticity, relaxation phenomena. And in time, actually, the stent that you have made, the short biomaterial introduction that you made, is going to be degraded in time. So in the end result is that, yes, you've cut a small part of your artery out, you place there some kind of biomaterial in there, you let the process happen, and in 2-3 months' time, the biomaterial is completely degraded and taken up by your body, and actually you have your own blood cells, your own cells presently in your blood that have restored the full capacity of your artery. That's the basis of regenerative medicine. And of course, I mean, in the past we've also been doing that on other things, not only on arteries, but also on the heart valves. We have developed this device here, which is an electrospin biomaterial-based material, which you can place as a new heart valve in there. What is the advantage? And actually it's the same principle. You place it in, and after a few months, actually the cell tissues have actually taken over the function of this heart valve. And the major advantage is that if you have a child which has a dysfunction in the heart valve at birth, actually this child will have to need 5 or 6 open heart surgeries before this child is, let's say, 16 or 18 years old, because the heart grows. So every time you need to put in a new heart valve, which actually is adjusted to the size of the heart. If it is your own tissue, which in the end has taken over the function of the inserted biomaterial, this will just grow with your heart as it does. So only needs one-time surgery. The difficulty, of course, is that, yes, you start with something very fundamental. You want to develop a new therapy, and there are a lot of different steps involved there. And I'm happy that it's just mentioned that actually, yes, this is still something you can do with a PhD, but if you get to the preclinical phase or if you get into clinical trials, it becomes very expensive. And it's not only expensive, there are actually 2 major hurdles that you need to tackle. First of all is that the ecosystem that you need in order to get your concept into a patient is a very complex ecosystem. Because there are not only universities in there, or academic medical centers, or larger or smaller industries, or suppliers of materials that you need. You have the regulatory offices, thank you for mentioning it, because they're very important. You have the healthcare institutes, there's the health foundations, so the patient groups in there. But actually most important, and actually that was not mentioned yet, is that yes, you might get the acceptance of a clinical center to be eligible to start using your concept. But if the insurance company is not going to provide actually the funding for this new therapy, which should be at least as good as the old previous one and cheaper, there's no way of any success. So somehow you need not only to have the hospitals in line, but also the insurance companies. And that's really very tough to manage. And next to that, of course, it's a long trajectory, it's already mentioned. It's a long run. You really need 10, 15 years for an application in regenerative medicine to get it into the clinic. At university, that's way beyond scope, 10, 15 years. For an industry, that's also on a long run, because typically they would be thinking more in 3, 4, 5 years timelines. And also, by getting into the preclinical phase or the clinical studies, the risk becomes larger and larger. Because you can have a beautiful concept which works in a preclinical state, but if in the clinical study there's some hiccup, forget it. So the investments become larger and the risks get higher. So what have we been doing in the Netherlands? Is in the field of regenerative medicine, seeing all these complications about the ecosystem and the long timelines, we've been starting with health foundations, which are at the bottom, for the heart, for the kidney, arthritis, diabetes. These are health foundations. They represent a lot of the patient groups, and they have a long-term vision, because no matter when, they want their patients to get a better life. Starting there and using national and regional funds, we have actually aligned 4 different universities in the Netherlands, of Leiden, Utrecht, Maastricht, and in Eindhoven, all connected to an academic medical center, actually to join in this program. I heard this morning that actually top-down doesn't work, but actually making the consortium and making all the arrangements that all together you want to contribute in the area of regenerative medicine is a top-down decision. How you run the project, yeah, that's bottom-up. But actually you need the top-down governance to make sure that for the long-term run, that you be assured that all will stay online. And one of the major advantages is that although all these universities, they have capacities about stem cell technologies, about making tissues, about making materials, that we have actually been able to run within this RegMed XB, so Regenerative Medicine Crossing Borders program. It goes from research excellence, which is at the academics. We have funds for seed capitals to actually relevant ideas to feed them with extra support. But most importantly, we have been able to create an infrastructure. And the infrastructure is that we actually have been building a pilot factory, because, well, we can make 1 heart valve, we can make 3 heart valves, but actually for the clinical acceptance, we need to make 100 identical heart valves. So we need to have the propensity to scale up. And that's why we really needed to build a pilot factory where one in Eindhoven, in Leiden, in Utrecht, and in Maastricht, where each of us have been able to specialize us in certain aspects where we can do actually refining of the concept and scaling up of the production. My last minute I will spend on the one in Eindhoven. Well, yeah, in the end, I'm part of the University of Eindhoven. We created there, it's called the Smart Biomaterials Consortium. This is an entity where we have actually 42 SMEs, or some of them are even larger than SMEs, where they actually start sharing the facilities to do any kind of scaling up and of biomaterial-related researches. And most importantly, it gives us the access to regulatory affairs, because this is something which is very hard to get into the academics. Yes, you can teach, which is very relevant to teach undergraduates the importance of being aware of regulatory affairs, but actually the doing, the making of the regulatory aspects in your concept development, that's really another specialty. So these type of institutes, which are actually independent of the university as such, so they're open and accessible for any type of SME or larger industry to join, they're very useful for that purpose. And of course, because in this case for the Smart Biomaterials Consortium, actually 2 facilities, one for refining of concepts and the second one on really scaling up the production. So my very last slide is about, yes, in regenerative medicine, it starts with the fundamental research, but if you want to get to the patient, it's really a long run. And my take-home message is, basically, you cannot do it by yourself. So please organize yourself. Don't be afraid of collaborations. Don't be too much afraid of sharing IP. If your objective is to get your solution at the patient, you need to be able and you need to be willing to share what you have.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, and you will be hanging around in the break, so come ask questions. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we just touch upon the subject of standardization, and that's why it's super relevant that you're here, Franck. Welcome, you're head of standardization in AFNOR, how you pronounce it?
Yeah, AFNOR.
Yes. So I guess it's a natural continuation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristine, and thank you. The good news is I'm the last speaker before the break. The bad news is I have to add a post-it on your slides on the chain of the different stages you have to think about. And thank you to the last speaker because he pronounced a word that is too often forgotten. Standard. We are not talking about regulatory. That's the good news for you. It's not a top-down thing. It's something that you have access to facilitate to the market. And most of the time, standardization is forgotten. And when it's forgotten, it's too late. We accompany a lot of startups in health, but in other areas, they develop their innovations, they are compliant to the regulation, but they are not compliant to the standard. They are not the standard setter. So my main message today is a post-it message. Don't forget about standards. And I can stop now. So AFNOR is the French national body for standardization. I was this morning in the Danish one, Danish standard. You've got a perfect organization here to address your questions. But in health, even if regulation is a very strong matter, standardization could be something you have to think about it, especially if you want to set the standards, to be the ones that propose the standard. You've got 3 main standardization organizations at the international level. We are not talking about Europe only. We are talking about international. For telecoms, ITU. For electrotechnology, medical devices, IDC. And for all the other area, including health, you've got ISO, and you've got the corresponding European organization. But probably ISO is the one that is most known all over the world. So, what is a voluntary standard? We are not talking about regulation. We are not talking about something is coming from Brussels or from a national government. We are talking about something that is pushed by the industrial in health, but also in other areas, to promote the best practices in the area they want to standardize. So it's voluntary. So the good news for you, the bad news is you have to invest standardization field. You can avoid to do that. But the good news for you is that you have a room, even when you are a startup, you have a room to be the standard setter. And it's, in most of the speeches I had to take, it's forgotten, because you are really mobilized by the regulation. That is a tough thing. But sometimes, again, it's too late when you come on the market and say, oh, I'm not compliant to ISO or to IC. Yeah, because your innovation was not pushed in the standardization phase. In health sector, you've got many standards, not as many as regulations. There's more regulation than standardization. But I will not detail. You've got standards very famous on the market. And there's a country, an area, a region of the world that completely understood that was not involved in standardization 15 years ago. And now it's one of the 3 top countries in standardization. It's China. It was not involved at all. Now it's Germany, United States, and China. So if China is interested, we have to be careful, especially in health. So we could give you many areas where in health there's standards in process, or they're already available. You've got one of the most famous in medical devices, of course, in ISO. These standards are revised regularly, so it's an opportunity for you to push your innovation inside the standardization, but you can also take an initiative to have golden standards, as the previous speaker said. And again, it's not something that is coming from outside to you. It's something that you can act on. And again, it's forgotten too many times. So as a conclusion for my speech, because I don't want to be too long, I will be very happy to get some questions if there are. It covers everything. There's no standards everywhere. So there could be room where you can have a standard to propose. And I've got an example in the presentation, if it's shared later, of some startups that pushed through standard their innovation, and then they get the market because they were the standard setters. But there's no mandatory standards everywhere, neither voluntary standards. So it's up to the Danish standards, to AFNOR, in each country there's an organization to help startup to see if there's something to do, or if it's too late, and you have to be compliant with an international standard, or if it's a good time for you to develop an initiative at international level. Don't let China, United States to be the only one to develop international standards. So that was my main subject. I'm a post-it speaker. Don't forget standards. Thank you very much.
Please stay. I'm sure there's questions. Yeah? Questions all the way down there? Yes?
Thank you, Franck. When you said that even for a startup there is a room to be a standard setter, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Yeah. And do you have examples?
Thank you, Bruno. Yeah, usually startups, that was the slide after, but we haven't prepared together. That's an example of bio. It's not totally health, but it's a startup that was from INRAE, so very famous in France as a research center, on ecotoxicology laboratory. What was good, they thought usually startups are thinking about IP, patents, but a way to promote your patents is to have the patents in the standard. That's a way. And there's a process to do that properly, to do it officially, not to hide your patents in the standardization. So this company has, from the start, say, we developed an innovation in water biomonitoring and ecotoxicology of water, but from the start, they do both patents deposit, and they took the initiative in standardization at international level. And again, it's an investment for them. It's not money. It's just the employees of this startup has to defend their innovation and the patents behind in the standardization. So they start at the French level, and after 16 months, it's a long process to get an agreement at an international level, especially when you have competitors, Chinese, French, anywhere. So after 6 months, they got the standard at the international level. The financial participation is only the time you spend in a meeting, but it could be long. And of course, the benefits, you are compliant to the standard because you were the standard setters, and you are opening a market internationally, whatever the regulation are in such countries. Some regions, like Europe, make standards mandatory. Some. In medical devices, it's true. European Commission said, if you want to be compliant to the regulation, you have to be certified based on these standards. But it's a minority of cases. Majority of cases are voluntary standards, and it's just a tool for exportation and for markets. So please, again, don't forget standards. And Danish standards is available for you. Not so far from here.
No, it's very close to here, actually. Yeah, one down there. Yes, we have.
Thanks. Thanks for bringing up standards. It's super important. My sort of experience with standards is that it's not the lack of standards that is the problem in health. The problem is often there's a lot of standards. Sometimes I wish there was a standard for standards.
Yes, me too.
Because one thing is that there's a lot of standards, but the standards are also very different.
Yeah.
And you need to spend a lot of time to understand each of the different standards.
Absolutely.
Because they're so different. And you have other standardization organization in health than the one you mentioned. So one is HL7, which is a super important standard in health. When we teach our engineering students, the IEEE standards are super important. So you know what? So if I'm a teacher and I'm to select standards to teach my students about, how would I go about doing this? Do you have any good suggestions of what standards to pick, how to teach them, how to introduce students to standards and all of this?
Thank you. First, for teaching, I'm pushing a lot of pressure in research area and in engineering school because I'm an engineer. I never heard about standards, but it was a core business of telecoms. So thank you first. You raised a very valuable point. Why should I go to ISO or to IEC or to IEEE? It's an open market, let's say. Even if some are private consortia with big companies behind, and some like ISO, IEC are national based. It's non-governmental agencies. So the rules for adopting a standard are a little bit different. Let me give you an example. In IEEE, the vote power depends on the size of the company. In ISO, Denmark has the same vote power than France. And the markets are different. So depending on the force you want to use, or sometimes the relevancy of the organization, you have to choose between IEEE, ISC, ISO. But when I have to give advice, I say, when you have the choice between this organization, you have to see what, at the final stage, when you will have to vote for adopting a standard, what will be the criteria? Will it be the size of the companies? Of course, for a startup, it will be difficult. Or will it be based on a national level? So Denmark vote, Danish vote, French vote. That's an important part. But sometimes you don't have the choice. ISO doesn't cover the area. So again, DS in Denmark is the right place for you to get the advice of the right place to go, because sometimes it's not in this in the organization I represent, ISO, ISC, and ITU. But you're right. Sometimes I have the same dream than you. I dream of standardizing the standardization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up here and telling about standardization. Not to avoid.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's time for a break. I heard there's cake and coffee over here again. So network, talk a lot, and enjoy your coffee. Okay, let's start again. Rolf, you ready?
Yeah.
Yes, Rolf
It's
is
on.
professor and Oh, sorry, it is on, yeah. And Head of Innovation of DTU Health Tech. So feel free.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Marianne, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about how we try to promote innovation at our department. Our head of department, Jan, already earlier this morning talked about our department. And so you already know that we're spread across a number of fields, from immunotherapy to imaging and drug discovery and so on, within the health tech field. And we are around 400 researchers. And our researchers, I would say, have quite a lot of focus on innovation. So I have an easy job. And just to show some highlights for the last 2 years, or a little bit more than the last 2 years, we filed, our researchers filed 73 invention disclosures, 26 cases were commercialized, licensed, or sold, or the like. And we had 3 spin-outs and quite a few in the pipeline. And which I think is great, and much better possibilities to do that now, especially thanks to the Novo Nordisk Foundation and so on, Pioneer Innovator Grants and all that. We raised a lot of money for helping maturing both the companies before they actually have a business registration and also afterwards in the initial phase. So I would say that there are three important things that we emphasize or try to have focus on, and that is because we are not a university or department for product development. We do a lot of research, but we try to encourage the mindset, the thinking that perhaps your result, your observation, your idea is useful. And so that's one thing. But also that we as a department and as an organization, DTU, we are in a receiving mode. That's very important, I think. And I think we really are that. Because what you really want to avoid, what happened quite a lot if you go 20 years back, is that people came with ideas and said we would like to and so on, and you know, it's difficult. It's a challenge to replicate innovation across a large organization, whether it's a university or a company. So ideas easily get dropped between some tables and nothing happens, and the inventors, they think, okay, I spent a lot of time on this, I don't want to do it again. And then you lose a lot. So it's really to be in this receiving mode. And then a third thing we think is important is that, and it's not so difficult. Can you hear me still? Yeah. At a technical university, to be animated to think commercially, because I mean, we collaborate with numerous hundreds of companies. Essentially, all our PhD students and all our research groups are one way or the other involved in collaboration with companies. So it's quite evident to everyone that actually this country makes a living primarily from producing and selling high-tech products. Just think about Novo Nordisk. So these are 3 important things we believe. And on the right side, you see the front cover of DTU strategy, technology for people, meaning, of course, that if the technologies should help people, they should be brought to the especially some of our perhaps older faculty and so on, that were never involved in patents, IP and all that stuff, could have a tendency to stay away from it. So what we try to tell everyone that you don't need to know essentially anything. There are a few crucial things you need to know and understand, and that is that what really costs money is developing the product. If you think about a drug, it could be 2-3 billion US dollars. When it has been developed and run off patent, you know it can be produced very cheaply by everyone. So for anybody to take the financial risk of development, whether it's a drug or a diagnostic tool, assay, kit that perhaps costs 50 or 100 million Danish crowns, to take that risk, they would need some exclusive position, some patent protection for a number of years to get a return of investment. So for everybody, it's important to understand that to have that, you need a patent, and you don't get a patent if either one, from DTU, if you didn't file a notification of invention, that is what we call invention disclosure, or if you publish the stuff before the patent application is filed. Because it has to be novel. Novel is absolute. Either it's novel or it's not novel. So it's very few things you need to know. You don't need to know the rest. There will be a lot of help and support taking care of that. So an important thing, and we're very lucky, I think, here at DTU, because from the highest level, that means, I pointed on you, but I should point up here. Marianne and our president, Anders, there's a lot of awareness at that level. Here we see Anders signing a license agreement with one of our former startups. Marianne celebrating some students winning Venture Cup. Marianne would also talk nicely about us in the press and so on. So there's a lot of awareness at the executive level, and that's really motivating for everyone. And then at the lower level, a little bit lower level, Jen, my boss, we have these employee development talks every year, and the head of department, Jan, will talk to the head of sections, and they will talk to the group leaders, and they will talk to the group members. So if you have that on the agenda, asking, Jan will ask the head of section, so when we meet in a year, what initiative will you take to promote innovation activity? And then it's difficult to come back in a year and say I did nothing. So it's a good way, it's a good tool to kind of remind people that it's something you should have in the back of your head. And then I make many presentations one-to-one. For example, I find a researcher, they publish something very nice, perhaps in a Nature communication, and say, that's fantastic. It says, this can really help solving this problem. But you never filed an NOI. What do you say, 2 minutes? Okay. So this way of, reminding people that this can be important. Okay, keep it simple. We have 150 PhD students and gets 50 new each year. I think we started much later than 1410. Okay. Questions. There should be no questions. So it's a lot of people and new people all the time. And if they have to go to our website and, it'll never happen. They just need to talk to, of course, their boss. And then they just need to know my name, and we will take it from there. Because I have fantastic support. Here from Skylab, we have innovation partners that are simply fantastic, and the same from our tech transfer office. So we have a whole bunch of people assisting the researchers when they have, filed an invention disclosure. So that's fantastic. Then one thing I mentioned in the beginning, that today you can get much more grants. We could that back in the 90s. I was in the initial phases involved in this company, and the point is that in this case it's a biotech company. The founders kept control of the company until it was worth 5 billion on the stock exchange, without having much money other than a grant of 1.5 million themselves. And that's actually, it's not for all type of spin-out companies. When I say spin-out, it's companies with IP from DTU. But for a number of them, if the inventors can be in the sandbox for a while and have enough money to buy them time, for example, in this case, took 1 year to persuade a big Swedish company to finance a development project, which actually financed the startup of the company, because valuation is very low in the beginning. Is a company worth 100,000, 1 million, 2 million? If investors come with a few millions, essentially you're quickly reduced to an employee hired by an investor. And perhaps that was not your dream. Your dream was to have the, what do you call it, the food under your own table, or be your own boss as a team. Not for all startups and spin-outs, but for some. So it's simply fantastic now that we can get money from the Innovation Fund, for example, when the company has a business registration, and from Novo Nordisk Foundation, they have Pioneer and Distinguished Innovator Grants. Simply, that's because even it costs 50 million or 100 million to develop the prototype or the Zero Series or whatever. If you can buy yourself time to convince somebody to finance it, somebody that is not diluting you equity-wise, it may stimulate or motivate many that it's their own company. It's difficult, but it's possible, like in this case. Okay, thank you.
We do have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question about the slide where there were all the different, so the department goes to the section, goes to the group leader, goes to the group. How would this work?
I hope they do. I don't know.
Yeah. So how does it seems like a lot of layers. What would happen if, for instance, the group leader is very research minded and not so much patent or innovation minded, and how would you circumvent that the group?
You cannot really avoid it, but I think if this is just one way of creating this awareness, because even you by law has an obligation to, if you think you haven't made something that could be protected as an invention, I mean the obligation to do that is not driving anything. It should be something that kind of, if people wanted to actually help patients and other come to the market, and I think most want their technologies to do that. But of course, I mean, if somebody, we have a few, but actually a few that was quite resistant to, I do basic research, yeah. Niels Bohr, he's inventor of 50 patents. No, Einstein is inventor of 50 patents. Our recent Nobel laureate, Morten Meldal, who got the Nobel Prize 2 years ago, is also an inventor of more than 20 patents. So, I mean, there's no... Somebody perhaps think that patents and all that, commercialization and so on, it's different from from basic research, but it's not necessarily. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rolf. And next on stage is Trine Bartholdy for Bioinnovation Institute. Welcome to the BII, also called, yes. Thank you.
Good. Oh, no. Skulle du have den her?
Can you hear me? No. I can also just shout maybe, or no, I shouldn't. Can you hear me now? No. No. Can you? Yeah. Now I can hear myself at least. And maybe I'll just start with something, because there are two things completely wrong on me right now. This is the one thing. I mean, now I'm in an innovation center surrounded by innovative people. This is not invented for women, because a lot of women even wear earrings or have sort of some hair in their back head. And every time I'm on stage, this is really annoying. So this is a challenge to all of you. Invent for women as well, please. The other thing is this one. Not invented for women, because a lot of women do not have the small pocket where you can put it in. And we do not have bottom holes because we wear blouses. So where do we put it? So that's challenge number 2. If you can find an alternative one, and I'm pretty certain you can come up with a cool pattern for that one. So that's just a challenge for you. What I wanted to say to Marianne and Trine and the whole team here, I'm really honored to be invited here today. I have the privilege at Bioinnovation Institute to be working with a lot of really talented people every day. I have the great pleasure and privilege of working with universities and PIs across, well, both in the US and across Europe. And I have to say DTU really stands out. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's the way you think innovation, it's your tech transfer office, and it's also the people you spin out with, the mindset, the way they grow, and I see that every day. So I just want to say a big thanks to DTU for being who you are and constantly trying to drive more innovation. My role at BII is as a Chief Innovation Officer. That can be many things, but in most practical terms, I am running 2 programs every day on a daily basis. One is a 3-year, now I'm off again. No? Okay. One of the programs I'm running is a 3-year translational program for company creation, and currently I'm working with 3 PIs from DTU on that one. Irina and Thomas Andresen, and who is Anja Boysen, of course. Where we have entered with them at an early stage, we looked into the science they had and we thought, how can we apply this in practice? And then we have a grant in the BioStudio program that I'm running, where we provide €1 million on a yearly basis for 3 years, during which time we try to create a company. And help them staying on the translational path. Yeah. Now I better hold this in the hand. So Bioinnovation Institute, you have heard the name a couple of days today. What is it? So Bioinnovation Institute, it's really a bridge. Think about us as a bridge. It's a bridge to translate science, but it's also a bridge to translate the entrepreneurial mindset for first-time founders. So we were founded back in 2018 by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. We are a non-for-profit institute/accelerator/incubator. It's actually, there's nothing like BII out there, so I cannot say precisely what we are. And we were being created because Novo Nordisk Foundation could see that there was a huge gap between the grant part, which they do really well, and then the investment part. They also have their own venture firms at the Novo Nordisk Foundation and Holding. But there was a big gap in between. Who will do all the hard work of the translational science and the company creation? So that was the basis of why BII was formed back in 2018. And now in 21, we were set 3. We are now an independent foundation with our own board. And we were giving a nice farewell present of around $500 million, which will take us for the next 5-7 years, I guess. But we're spending the money rather quickly, so I think we have to go up and ask for more money fairly soon. But the good thing is we're doing quite well. Until now, actually a week ago, we passed 100 startups that we have funded. And at the same time, we can also see that we are doing or having some sort of an impact together with institutions like DTU in terms of getting researchers into the entrepreneurial journey. We see more than 50% of our founders are first-time entrepreneurs, and we take good care of them at BII. Our mission is quite similar to what we have heard earlier today. We are here to translate world-leading science into actual solutions to solve the problem for people and society. And I mentioned one of the programs that I'm running, the translational program, but we also have another program called Venture Lab, which is the more standard accelerator program, which is running with 2 open calls every year. And we support across therapeutics, health tech, as well as biosolutions. So if any of you have anything where you think, is there an incubator nearby, have a look at our homepage. So I was asked to tell a little bit about the basic, or not the basic, but the needs, special needs for medtech. We already heard a lot today, so I actually have to improvise a little bit because a lot of the things I prepared has already been said. So bear with me. But I can tell you that at BII, we try to address the unmet needs across the spectrum, and there are 4 common denominators. The funding. I mean, we have heard it mentioned a little bit today, but this is important. The funding needs to be there. We provide that at BII for all our programs. Then there's the knowledge. This is also extremely important. At BII, the staff, we come with various backgrounds. I have a venture capital background. I've been in pharma. I've been a CEO in medical startups myself. And all my colleagues come with various amazing backgrounds that we try to support our startups with. And then the network. Building network. This is actually something that can sometimes be difficult for students or first-time founders to really understand how important network is. You have to go out there, such as an event today. There should be 20 startups out here looking to get into contact with all of you here, because all of you come with different competences or background that they could put into play. So networking, how to learn how to network, that's really important. But at BII, we have network within some core competences needed, which is a venture capital network, which we expose our startups to very early on. And then also industrial network that we keep building, allowing the companies to get access to relevant industry early on. Then the infrastructure, of course, we cannot beat DTU on the lab equipment and offering, but we do have around 1,000 square meters of wet and dry lab at BII, and we are tripling that these years. So these are basic needs for any startups. Now, what about medtech or health tech? It's a lot of things, medtech/health tech. I keep exchanging whether I call it health tech and medtech, so bear with me on that as well. Any of these categories, and there are many more, have different needs. On top of that, you will have a regulatory path. We have heard about that. We have seen an increased level of usage of AI and ML, how to cater for that. I mean, just talking about IP that we just heard about, this is difficult to patent. I mean, how can you patent a code? Does it even matter? Then we see an increasing focus on deep tech, quantum. I mean, this is becoming really complicated. We are sitting next to Niels Bohr Institute, and now we also have a quantum accelerator lab close within BII. So this, I believe we will see an increased convergence between the physics part, the biology, the digital. We heard social science early on. I think that's actually also quite important. And then on top of that, you can also say each of these will have their own business model. Is it a platform? Am I building a product? Or what is it actually? Or am I doing both? What is my business model here? So, what are the unique challenges? There are a lot of hurdles. We have heard some of them mentioned here, so I will skip some of them rather quickly. But the early choice of business model. This is important. There's a big difference about, I've invested both in therapeutic and medtech for many years. There's a huge difference. So if you invest in therapeutics, it's okay you don't have a final plan for how to get to market. What the investors are looking into is the proof of concept in man or woman. Typically during the phase 1B, that would be sufficient for them. They don't expect you to take it all the way to market, but you need to have a clear plan on how to get to the initial proof of concept in people. But that's not the case for medtech. Here you often need to have a plan to go all the way to market, and even to be on the market for the first 5 years. And I'll come a little bit back to it when we talk about funding of medtech, health tech. Then an increasing demand is on the ESG and sustainability. If you go for any investment from a venture capital fund, they have a lot of pressure on that you need to have a clear plan for these. And now I only have 2 minutes left, so I need to go really quickly now. You need access to the right people. Go out there, build your network. You need the market access and outcome. And I do want to spend a few seconds on this, because the outcome understanding. You may have an amazing technology, but what can it actually do? What's the benefit? How do you translate that into a financial matrix as well? And you need that, because otherwise nobody will pay for it. Regulatory, you heard about. Industry, I need them to come into play and be more risky. They are not participating enough, and they're really dominating. There's the serial entrepreneur, there's the access to data, there's the access to funding. Clinical trials, we heard about that. Clinical adoption. Denmark is quite small. It's easy to create an island of success in a big ocean of failures. So make certain you can scale your technology up. IP trademark, health tech is changing so rapidly. Be certain you know how to protect your technology and be vigilant all the way. Then there's the production and supply chain. So the startup. Long-term fundraising plan, have that in place. Add another 6 to 12 months to your plan, because you will never make it in time. People, go out there, get the right competencies on board. Stay on top of your differentiators, because there's competition out there. Think 5 years ahead, have your target product profile or MVP in place. And then the partnerships with hospitals, industry, and whoever you will need. And look to the US as well. I see Mads sitting here from Medtech Copenhagen. And he is right now at Johns Hopkins doing an intern exchange as a student. Look out for international liaisons as well. Texas Medical Center, Novo Nordisk Foundation has a collaboration with them, in which program you can go over there and test out your product. And I will leave it here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah? A few questions. Yeah, Kristine?
Thank you. Kristine Garter here from DTU Skylab. Thank you very much, Trine. It's really an impressive program that you're running at the BII, and I know there's a lot of startups here from DTU Skylab that would really like to be a part of your program. Unfortunately, what we face is that many of them, when they reach out to you, get the answer that they are not mature, thank you, mature enough to actually be taking up in your program. And at a certain point, we cannot support them anymore, and they need to sort of live off something. And then they're in this dilemma, because if they raise money from VCs or business angels, then they cannot be taken up in your program. And if they have applied for taking up all the soft money that is available for them, they are sort of just lost because where to turn to. So I'm curious to hear if you have any good ideas, advice, or how to fill this gap so they can live and they can be mature and be good enough to actually be taking up in your fantastic program.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kristine. So first of all, we are a beneficiary foundation, and that means we are not allowed to fund any startup with commercial money. So it's not that we don't want to, we are simply not allowed by the authorities and our statutory obligations. So the best advice I could give is that maybe upfront test out what is needed to get into BII in due time, because I know a lot of my colleagues are very happy to take such discussions, and I also know a lot of our colleagues is actually coming out here from time to time. So having a training session on what is needed before you can go to BII, because maybe that could allow them to focus on it so they could get in the first time they try. So that would be my solution right here now, but we can certainly have another talk after today. Yeah, Marianne?
So Trine, one of the reasons why we thought it could be interesting to have you here is because you don't only look to Danish companies, right? So maybe many of the people here are foreigners, so maybe you should allude a bit to that.
Oh, nice for that hint. So yes, the program I'm running is the BioStudio program, and it's for academic research projects to take their projects into the translational phase and form a company after 3 years. The BioStudio program is the primary program, or the only program where we can work with international PIs and organizations today. It's an invitation-only program, but you can send a letter of interest through our email. And then we will reach out to you and start a discussion. Most of the projects we have we start up 5 projects of these a year, and we expect to spin out around 2 every year. It's a new program, we only had it for 2 years. We provide 1 million euro a year over 3 years and a lot of support and hire in an entrepreneur in residence, which is a person with a scientific and commercial / startup experience who can run the project and accelerate it quickly. So if any of you are in contact with amazing PIs, with amazing science, do reach out to us. We are looking into what can be the cool next thing, and we take high risk on this. We heard business models before. We don't only support projects in BII, which is the standard venture capital case. We actually also take chances where we can see there is a high unmet need. Maybe the business model is not completely clear, but we expect we can find out how to get it funded and how to get it out there. As long as the science is strong and the unmet need is clear, then we will help finding the business model.
Okay, we got the final question for you.
Jan?
Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing what you're doing. One question about how do you measure your success?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I got this word from someone the other day. Be careful that your performance does not become your mission. And why am I saying that? Because of the number I showed in the beginning, the 100 startups. Is that a success in itself? No, not necessarily, right? Because our mission is how to get, finding solutions to get to market to solve issues for people and society. So we do have KPIs, not only on numbers of startups we support, also numbers in terms of how much money do they raise, because that's an indication of the longevity. And now we have a 5 multiple in that. So for every crown we have giving the startups, in average, they have raised another 5. But then, of course, we are tracking when do they go to clinical trials, how many products are actually on the market now. So that we are also measuring. And that should be the hard endpoints, how many projects actually take it to the market. But as we heard earlier on, it can take up to 10 years. So we don't have so many hard endpoints yet.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Trine.
Thank you. And please go innovate.
Welcome to stage. Yes. We have Joni, Frederick here from Paris. You're a development engineer? Yes?
Yes.
So please, take away, it's yours.
Thank you. So, I'm very happy to be here. I am in a privileged position because I'm not the head of anything. I am not a decision maker, but privileged because I work very closely with startups and students who are very passionate about their biomedical ideas. So for me, this is very rewarding. When I saw the question, how can we promote innovation in healthcare, I had only one logical thing to do, and that was to share our example with you, how we have exactly this mission through the creation of an interdisciplinary center that we've called Engineering for Health. So our mission is exactly that. We were recently inaugurated, and our goal is really to draw on the expertise of the researchers, etc., out there, and leverage that to promote innovation in health. So this is how we do it. I'm going to just focus on three very important things for me. It's the environment that you place yourself in, how we've made strategic decisions to foster this innovation. We put a lot of emphasis on training and teaching of students, and I will tell you how we try to promote the links between clinicians and researchers. So we are Institut Polytechnique de Paris. We are a group of 5 engineering schools whose absolute strength lies in the physical science. We are fundamental sciences and engineering, grouping more than 250 researchers and support staff, more than 21 specialist laboratories. When we said we need to have a system in place for promoting innovation in health, it was logical for us to draw on the hard sciences and use that to apply to biology, because that is where our strength lies. We have also a founding partner who is a national research group for digital sciences, and very importantly, a medical research partner. So in our case, it is a private hospital group called the group Paris Saint-Joseph. Probably a good reason why it's private is that they do seem to have more freedom administratively to do the tasks that they want to do, and it's been quite important for us. Speaking of environment, one of our flagship projects was to create what we call a living lab. It's a dedicated prototyping space for biomedical engineering. It was inaugurated just over a year ago, and very importantly for us, we are physically positioned inside the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. It makes sense. They already have over 1,000 meters square of classic prototyping space. They are the experts helping startups through various incubation programs and with technology transfer. And what we have done is offered complementary innovation space, which is very attractive to startups, students, and researchers alike, because we are really aimed at offering proof of concept space. All the startups that I've worked with directly have told me one thing: space has been their most valuable resource. We're there to provide resources, not only space, but the basic tools that they need. We have a general wet lab, but also specialist tools such as bioprinting and cell culture space, and very importantly, the expertise behind that. So when a startup comes to the space, they have experts who can help them with the development of their prototype, and as well as offer scientific technical expertise. We have directly 2 platforms that we make available to students, startups, and researchers. That is the Living Lab that I just mentioned, but also another platform where we have specialist techniques like AFM for biology, a microfluidics lab where they can also do microfluidic proof of concept work, and other platforms such as 2 advanced microscopy platforms. For example, our clinical partner offers a preclinical research department group where they have actually 3 surgical operating blocks that are at the disposition of researchers who need to do their proof of concept. We also have a platform which is focused on digital tools for digital and robotics tools for healthcare. So, as I said, open to researchers, startups and hospitals in our consortium, and something that's been very important and very attractive for startups who are trying to launch themselves. If they are accepted in an incubation program that they have had a lot of competition to get into, they can access these resources for free. And this has been a major source of attractivity for them. We have a very big focus on training. We've put in place specialist master's programs with an emphasis on health, and as well as a PhD track. Subjects such as biomedical engineering, of course, biology and health, mechanical engineering for clinicians, and mathematics for living systems. Some specialist courses, for example, that we've put in place specifically for biomedical engineering include biomedical imaging, diagnostics and treatment, biomechanics in health and disease, optical imaging for biomedical diagnostics, and even wearable devices for healthcare. So students are really immersed directly in the subject. And for example, in diagnostics and treatment, a student will actually shadow a medical practitioner throughout a few days and really be immersed there to see what kind of problems need solving. Of course, providing tools is not just physical tools and help, but it's providing money as well. We offer many master's and PhD track scholarships, and we've put in place 2 award systems. So for conferences and doing international experiences, these students can apply at any time throughout the year to attend events. We are helping the researchers in biomedical engineering through various grant programs, so postdoctoral fellows, seed and Kickstarter grants that help researchers in the early phase of their career to really launch their subjects, and even our pedagogical seed grants, which are really aimed at people who are putting new teaching programs in place, so they can apply to fund small tools, small instruments, or even consumables that they need for new practical courses or anything like that. Some of the very interesting things that we've added to these master's programs, and something that I really like because I am helping students with their design projects every year, is a biomedical engineering innovative design project. They choose a project that runs throughout the year, and at the end of this they have to come up with an actual physical prototype of something that they've tried to solve in the medical world. So this has been a really great project. We've had things from, for example, students developing a new surgical training tool for pediatric emergency procedures, to developing a new pipeline for personalized maxillofacial surgery, and a young student who's currently doing something very simple but really cool. He spent some time shadowing a doctor. He decided to calculate how much time the doctor loses in one day simply trying to log into things and using passwords to access things. And so he's working on absolutely reducing that time. So it's a great project. We do lots of hospital visits and pharmaceutical visits for these students. There is nothing more motivating for an engineering student than to be fully immersed in the real environment. They do things like attend surgeries and live surgeries. They've seen live care of COVID patients, for example. And of course, this also helps the student to realize their strengths and weaknesses. If they want to help to change the world, but they can't handle seeing blood, that is where they're going to discover that they should perhaps rather stick to more mechanical things. We also put in place extra training courses exactly to try to help the researcher decide how and when to patent. And this year we're running, which is very specific to biomedical devices, where we address questions like how and when to patent. Can you patent your software that you've used to develop something, and how to start thinking about things like standards in biomedical devices. So we try to promote this clinician research bridge. We have a very good program in place that is called our Medical Fellows Program. We offer 2 a year, very specifically for projects that are between a clinician and a researcher. So this has been a very nice system put in place. It really bridges those 2 worlds with very very active projects between people who are very willing to do that and now have found the means to really do something concrete. We also have various ways of sponsoring this research. So we have chairs, research chairs, which are for specific biomedical subjects, as well as various sponsors, for example, from pharmaceutical companies. And we do a lot of work to promote visibility of this and help researchers be aware of what we're offering. We have much more interest from partner hospitals now too, so it's not just our founding partner, but we're in talks with other hospitals who really like what we're doing and want to access the researchers. So we also spend a lot of time networking, promoting, and for example, through seminar series where doctors and researchers alike come and present themselves to the student. They can not only promote themselves and show their work, but it's a great way to attract students to your programs. So I'd like to just thank, we have a very dedicated executive team who work hard to put in place the right things to help people find the right partners. We administer the money, and of course, thank you very much to the funding sources who help us to do this. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Joni. Very interesting.
Thanks.
Yes, any questions here? No?
None.
I think you got around it. Thank you so much. Okay, we have one over here, sorry. Please stay. Yes, we have one.
Just a very brief question. Thank you very much. Very interesting. How many students do you have?
In one master's program, very specific, so for example, biomedical engineering, we have roughly 12 master's students per year, but that's just one program. So it's hard to tell you the numbers, because if we group all of those students, we're probably closer to 60. I hope I'm not wrong. Yeah.
And they all have to go out in this immersion course?
They don't all do that immersion. Well, many of them, some are elective, some are not. So some of them choose to do courses where they're very closely following a clinician, whereas some may stick to more mechanics for biology, etc. So it's very flexible.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that one.
Thanks.
Okay. So last one on stage today, or the last presentation at least. It's your turn, Emma. You're actually a startup.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So someone from the real world here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, indeed, my name is Emma Moonen, and I'm part of a startup that is part of the Eindhoven University of Technology. And I hope I sent the correct slides. Otherwise you have to improvise. Which I did not, because this is indeed the Dutch version of my defense. Okay. Okay, yeah, I'm very sorry because I made whole different slides. Anyway, so switch, sorry. Yeah, so the idea is I work on sweat sensing for non-invasive health monitoring, and the idea is how do we go from research to innovation? And because I've just finished my PhD, I must give you a warning that there's quite some research in my presentation as opposed to all the others of today, but maybe it's a nice closure of this part of the day. So what happens currently if someone is administered to a hospital, they can be continuously monitored on physical. Maybe I can just put my slides, or is it not possible? Is it very complicated? If I take my laptop, or? It's my mistake. I sent a completely the wrong version. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. So you can be continuously monitored on the physical parameters like heart rate and respiration rate. And then depending on your health status, blood needs to be drawn by a qualified nurse. It needs to be sent to the needs to be sent to the laboratory and needs to be analyzed. And the time it takes before this blood comes back can be already a problem, for instance, if the patient deteriorates rapidly, and furthermore, it's intrusion to the workflow. It needs to take time, it needs to take the right persons to do this. So that's when we propose to use sweat, to combine the continuous measurements of the monitor with the chemical information you get from blood. And sweat has a couple of advantages. It's non-invasively available, so you don't need to enter the body. It's continuously available from the skin, and it's a rich source of biomarkers like glucose, ureum, or cortisol. But currently, it's not used in a hospital to get information of the health status of the patient. And that's mostly because we don't sweat a lot if you are in rest. You're not exercising, you're not in sauna. So the sweat rate is in the order of 0.1 to 1 nanoliter per minute per sweat gland. And only 10% of the sweat glands are active, which results in about 10 to 60 active glands per square centimeter. And the topography of the skin is very big at the scale we're talking of. So sweat sensing, this is completely different, sorry. Sweat sensing is used for athletes, for instance, mostly in literature, but there are a few commercial products. And in that case, they put a chamber on top of the skin, and it needs to fill, and then it flows towards the sensor. But at the sweat rate of a patient, this takes about 40 hours, so it's still way too long for clinical results. So that's why around 5 years ago, an idea was proposed to do this in what we call the discretized way. So we place a lot of small chambers on top of the skin that fill very quickly in the order of 10 to 15 minutes. And then the droplets or the sweat gets transported in droplets. So we can sample a large piece of skin, but transport it very quickly towards the sensor. And the first, most of the research that was done was to find a way to transport these droplets. And that's done via a technique called electrowetting on dielectrics. So by applying an electric field, the wetting parameters of the surface change, which is then able to steer droplets in a certain direction. Sorry. So we can make these droplets, and they need to be small. They need to be in the order of 1 nanoliter in order to be in the same sweat rate as the person's in rest. And we tested that for a couple of different parameters, and we can do it quite quickly. So this is a droplet of 1 nanoliter. So the next step was to integrate sensing. So this is a sweat rate sensor. We can detect the passing of these droplets on top of a sensor. So that was the first sensor. And then the next step would be to integrate this into a prototype. So we made a first prototype that consists of 4 distinct sections, which each have 200 of these collection chambers and around 500 electrowetting electrodes. And it can be placed on top of this finger, like also would be the SpO2 clips, or for instance on the arm. Then we had to come up with a way first to not test on people, so we developed an artificial skin platform to have a step before we actually had to go to people. We tested the prototypes on this, and I will skip this, sorry, before we tested on humans. And then what we found is that we can, in resting state, persons that are in resting state at this very low sweat rate, for the first time we can collect sweat and we can transport it to a sensor location. And yeah, this is a small video, but it looks like this. The droplets are collected to the middle. And yeah, this is where I can actually close this because it's also the end. So then the research was sort of at a certain stage where we thought this might be a cool idea to think about how could we use this in a startup in the market. But then it became a very difficult phase because we saw that it had a lot of potential because we are the first that can actually analyze sweat of people in resting state. So it can be used for patients. It can be used, for instance, to measure glucose or cortisol or hormones or even therapeutics that can also sometimes end up in your sweat. So we looked at when is it. Yeah, we're now currently, the startup now consists of 2 people. We have 2 founders. It's me and it's Timon, and he has a background with Philips and has a lot of knowledge about medical wearables. And myself have worked on this technology. And I was lucky to now be a fellow of what we have, the Faculty of Impact. It's a 2-year Dutch program that supports researchers to stay as a postdoc in academia, but on the same time work on creating impact with the research. And now we are currently looking at what would be the best business case for our technology. And currently we're looking at monitoring in the pediatric ICU, mainly on stress and also on the glucose values. As mostly in ICU, people have arterial lines, so it's very easy, relatively easy to get blood. And blood is still very golden standard, so no one was really willing to change that. But with children, they have much less blood, but they still sweat. So we're currently exploring that proposition and going further with that, looking for more funding, of course, as always, looking at more people to collaborate with us. Now I need to think what was on my next slide. Yeah, and in that way, we hope that in the next year we can finish our first business plan and first idea how to go further with the company, and then we need to continue with the research to do the first clinical trial, and then hopefully that depends, 10 years maybe we can make impact with the research in an actual situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, even though that you didn't have your slides.
Yeah, sorry.
You did a really good job. Thank you.
Probably send them too quickly.
Any questions for Emma about the startup? Yeah, Trine is over there.
Thank you so much for sharing this adventure with us, Emma. And up front, I wish you good luck. It's amazing to see what you're doing. So one thing we haven't talked about a lot today is the founder issues. You have one co-founder. How do you find that? Sometimes you must be in disagreement. How do you work together? Who takes the decisions? And could you maybe elaborate a little bit on the challenges, the ups and downs?
Yes, that's indeed a very good question. Because we were still, in the start we were really in the process of we had a nice idea and we want to join, and how are we going to do this was quite open, and everyone that came to us we were willing to have a discussion with, which we ended up with actually 4 people that were in the weekly update meetings. And then I had a talk with what's now the other founder, and we realized that was too much for now, for the process where we were in, especially because they were also a bit more senior, and I was the only junior that actually had to go to the lab again and do the work. So then we had to make a decision to ask them to leave, basically, which is already first. It's quite difficult in a team that has just formed to do this kind of things, but it's worked out for the best, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we had another question here.
Thank you, very clear presentation. So a question. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for a very nice and very clear presentation. So I'd like to make the link with what was said earlier. And in this case, was the startup or the work you're doing, it was driven by the bottom-up, say the scientific development and the capacity to detect very small quantities of given substances, or was it problem-driven, as was suggested to work better this morning? Can you tell us something about the history?
Yeah, so I think 5 years ago, and the European, so it was a European consortium project, a research project that was funded. The initial idea was also coming from the hospital, that this was not possible to measure chemical biomarkers in a continuous way. So there was a sort of defined problem. But then for the grant proposal, of course, it was very technical, and they did look at some use cases, because the initial problem is very wide. So they looked at some use cases, but not always very verified. So it was, for instance, in the ICU, urea monitoring, I think, and babies. So then we had the 4 years of research, which was very technology driven, that ended up in the end of my promotion. And then we realized that indeed, and also got this as feedback and in sessions like this, that we were very much focused on the technology. So that's why we're now taking at least a few months, a little bit a step back, and we're talking to experts in the field and finding their actual biggest problem in measuring biomarkers continuously. So where is the most need for continuous? Where is the most need for this non-invasive? Which biomarkers do they need? How does this connect to a disease? There's also a lot unknown about sweat, so we also need to create a little bit of interest for them to be willing to leave blood aside and be convinced that sweat might also work. And then we also know that then we go back to the technology and develop it a bit further. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma. So that was actually last presentation or speaker, but please stay. Don't leave yet. Now you have an exercise at the tables. Please discuss 2 key takeaways from today's speakers and presentations. You got 5 minutes, so talk at the tables, interact, discuss.
Maybe you are at table.
Okay. I heard some nice discussions around the tables. Yeah, would you like to share your key takeaways with us?
No, I didn't invent the, please, my colleagues here. They're the generators of the concept.
Okay, please come. Yeah, there's a microphone.
Thank you. I guess the democracy determines here that I'll speak, so my pleasure. So I guess we were inspired by this notion that you, Trine, had, that we shouldn't be defined by our performance. You said it in a better way than I now can repeat, and so we ended up in this conversation about the role of KPIs in these kinds of industries. When are you just going after the numbers, or are you going after the impact that can be more qualitatively defined? Maybe you miss a very good radical innovation because that's not in your KPI. And also talking about, maybe a question could be, what have you contributed to the impact, rather than just thinking about how many papers published or anything else, patents, whatever. So I guess we kind of landed on, yes, we love the numbers, but we shouldn't be defined by our KPIs, and we need to have sort of a broader view that allows for more qualitative assessment of contribution. Is that fair?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So KPIs can disrupt innovative thinking. So what about down here? What did you discuss? Uh-oh, pressure.
Hi. From my perspective, I'm a student. I'm in biomedical engineering department, and I'm also part of Copenhagen Medtech, as we mentioned before.
Yes.
I think one of the key insights and takeaways from this all this event is that we have to connect more the DTU and the university with the hospitals. I think this connection started to evolving now also with the technical hospital, and we had last semester we had a special course. It's a needs findings course that we were inside the department of hospital, and now it is continuing with other departments. So I think it's a good initiative for the students to be inside the hospital to understand the technical needs. I have seen from the Paris University that they're having very good programs and courses about the innovation design, and I think it's something that's missing, for example, from our department. And I know that here from DTU Health Tech, I think it's a good idea.
Super specific.
Yeah, I think a good idea to put some new things regarding the innovation part, because we're having a good program with the courses for imaging, biosensors, and all this stuff. But I think we are missing the part of putting the students to the more innovation thinking. Of course, we have Skylab, that are main programs, but I mean, related to our department, I think it's very in a mature way.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go over here.
Is it working? Yeah. I think we had similar thoughts about the whole topic. It's a great event, and I think it's good that you bring together many people from different disciplines. Looking more at the other side, I was a bit missing what's happening with the startups that don't survive. How do we back up those, and what is our answer to them? And here we always say, okay, here's an opportunity for you, but we might also look a little bit more at the risky part, and also the discussions you have. You have to make tough decisions in a very early career. So I think that could be something to address a bit more in the future, because not every startup will be successful in the end, as we know.
That's how it is. Yeah. Thank you. I think we can take one final one. Yeah, in the corner over there.
So I'm going to just repeat the nice words of my colleague here who spoke about all these different facets being like pieces of a puzzle. And it would be very nice to try to simplify the processes, for example, between the puzzle pieces, as well as find the missing ones, because for a researcher we're worrying about regulations, about commercializing, about whether or not to start a startup, research, so all the different things, but actually trying to make the complete puzzle would be very useful. How to do that is probably a very big challenge.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else? Yes, over here.
Hi, thank you. Tatiana Panteli from EuroTech Brussels office. So yeah, great event, and thank you very much for all the fantastic presentations. We discussed here that there are a lot of opportunities for collaborations in our EuroTech universities, but also with ecosystems around our universities as well. And in Brussels, as one of our objectives and tasks, we deal with the European funding. And we also found out that, of course, you all need the money for all your fantastic ideas and proposals. And we have all the ingredients in this room and in our universities to actually pursue these funding opportunities. In the previous period, we got, as EuroTech universities, 1.2 billion from European sources. And we can do more, because these ideas, which are very useful for the society, definitely deserve to be funded. Yeah. So I would like to encourage you to work with EuroTech, to approach us in the Brussels office, approach your colleagues in the EuroTech Universities Alliance, and let's do more together. It's possible, and yeah, we can do it. So it's everything is here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was the last input. Very nice input. Thank you.
So everybody, end of the day, thank you so much for those of you who stayed until the end. We can have a small glass and a chat before you leave. I hope you'll stay for that as well. I think it has been a very interesting day. I hope you have too. Of course, it's always, I feel a little sorry for Emma, who was the last presenter, because the energy is a little out of the room, but I think you did a great job. There is so much potential. So now we need to grab the potential. And I don't think there is, I'm sad to say, but I don't think anybody can put down that puzzle. That's probably not going to be possible. So we have to do what we always do in a place like this, you know, take a chance, do some prototyping, take a risk, do some experimentation. Some of it will pan out and be fantastic. And that which will fail, because some will fail, we will learn from, and we will become wiser and wiser, and imagine how wise we will become in the end, right? So thank you very much for coming, everybody. It was a pleasure having you here.